Hey everybody, how's it going? Hope you're having a lovely day. A few years ago, I did a video on this thing that went through Congress talking about having something inside of all new vehicles that will detect whether or not you are an impaired or drunk driver, as it says over here, to ensure the prevention of alcohol-impaired driving fatalities. Advanced drunk and impaired driving prevention technology must be standard equipment in all new passenger motor vehicles. Now, to be clear, when I made this video, this was not a new rule that had come out. This was simply Congress asking the National Highway and Transit Safety Administration, otherwise known as NHTSA, to create a rule. So the way this would work is you would have an advanced notice of proposed rulemaking. Then there would be a notice of proposed rulemaking. Then after a lot of information gathering, they would propose a rule. And then it would take several years for this to be implemented into new vehicles. So this was at the very, very early stage. The reason that this is something that struck me as weird is because I did not have all the information yet that we do now. But as I've gone over, there is a lot of technology inside of vehicles already that are internet connected that allows the manufacturer of the vehicle to figure out what you're doing with the vehicle and then sell that data to insurance companies that will often find ways to raise your rates based on BS artificial intelligence ways of trying to figure out how you're driving. One example that I use very often comes from the early days of Tesla full self-driving. If you tap the brake on that car at all in the early days, your safety score would get dinged. You used to have a really high safety score to be able to get access to full self-driving. And what they dinged your safety score for would be hysterical. So the electric cars have regenerative braking, meaning when you take your foot off the gas, they don't coast. The motor becomes a generator, so it's resisting you, and that is used to recharge the battery, and that's a form of braking. Now, when you do that, you're not getting full braking like you do if you smash your foot on the brake pedal. And if you really, really need to stop very quickly because of somebody in front of you doing something stupid, even if you had a good following distance, you would get dinged. So you would just have to do this thing where you would take your foot off of the accelerator and pray that the regenerative braking was enough for you to not hit the person in front of you, because if you hit the actual brake in order to stop, the car would ding your safety score. These are things that have improved with time. But the point when I bring up that example is that many of these safety systems built into the vehicle have bugs. So when you're implementing them without the consent of the driver, in the case of what General Motors did, where they were spying on how people drove their car and reporting it to automakers and then using this garbage system to try and figure out who is and is not a good driver without their express consent, this is harmful. And my concern here was that, this is even before I realized this was a thing, is that if you have a system in a vehicle that is going to try to figure out whether or not I am impaired, what happens if this system says that I'm impaired when I'm not actually impaired, and now I can't drive my car? This is of serious concern. So if I'm driving and I have lane assist in my car, and the lane assist goes off when I don't think it should have, I take control of the wheel again, and who cares? I'm mildly annoyed by a beep. If the detection of an object in front of me, the forward collision detector goes off when, in fact, it just saw a shadow somewhere, and that was not actually a car in front of me, or it went off when it shouldn't have. Again, annoying noise, but I would rather have that on, and then in that 1 out of 100 times where it is correct and actually would have gotten into a collision, avoided the collision, then have the system not on at all. Those systems have a very, very low cost to me when something goes wrong. It's an annoying beep here or there, so I'm okay to keep it on. I'm not one of those drivers that thinks I am better at driving than everybody else and so much better. I am never going to have that. No, I mean, you know, if you drive 1,700 miles across the country, at some point, maybe you have a following distance that's not perfect, and I'm okay with having the car tell me something. And frankly, I think more people should have this stuff in their car, especially in Texas, where people drive like this. Rest in peace, this Steve's Mercedes E350 from 2016. Nice car, but going back to being serious here for a moment. The cost here, if this system malfunctions, is disabling my vehicle. If my car believes that I am impaired when I am not actually impaired, and it shuts the vehicle off, that's a serious problem to me. This is no longer an annoying beep that I hear as I'm going down the road. And further, this is more serious than other forms of safety equipment because the fix is that you are shutting down the car. You're keeping it from working. Now, this is not necessarily a system that is being accessed remotely, but when you combine the fact that most cars nowadays are connected to the internet, many of them require internet connectivity for certain features and functionality to work, most people have their car connected to the internet without even fucking knowing, and then you put this in there, you understand why there's a lot of reason and cause for concern when this came out. There is the slippery slope fallacy, which is when you make a mountain out of a molehill, and then there's just observing reality. A $400 baby monitor that stops working, a thermostat that turns into a subscription, and so on and so forth over the past several years. So I wanted to catch up on this several years later and just go over some of the things that have happened since I did this video and go over some of the things that are concerning to me. I noticed that Thomas Massie, he is a House of Representatives representative from Kentucky. I always follow everything he does because he's not my state representative, but he voted against funding this, and he was very much so outvoted. So it looks like there was a vote on this very recently, and it failed 164 to 268. Thomas Massie introduced an amendment to defund this entire section that would go over this, and it failed, again, 164 to 268. This was bipartisan. It wasn't only Democrats that voted against defunding this, it was also about 57 Republicans as well. So in a bipartisan way, the United States Congress thinks that it's a great idea that my car tried to figure out whether or not I'm impaired and then stop driving as a result of it. There was a standalone repeal bill. It looks like Representative Scott Perry introduced no kill switches in cars, and this went nowhere. It stalled in committee. Representative Debbie Dingell, my apologies if I got your name wrong, from Michigan, introduced a bill titled H.R. 6704. This bill requires automakers to immediately start equipping cars with this, even if it's not necessary yet. So even if they're not using it yet, put this stuff in the cars. The only reason I can imagine you doing that is to make it easier later on to go back and enable this technology in all these cars. Now, there are different ways of doing this. There are many different technologies, and the reason that this has not necessarily gone anywhere or become a rule is because it looks like none of these technologies were commercially available products that were good enough to satisfy National Highway and Transit Safety Administration, which I think is a good thing. They tend to be a little bit more conservative, which is why I'm surprised they let Tesla's full self-driving call itself that for as long as they did. There are different technologies that they would use for this. One of them is breath-based, the other is touch-based. These are called DADSS, for those of you out there who hate acronyms as much as I do. Driver Alcohol Detection System for Safety. This is a public-private partnership between the National Highway Safety and Transit Administration and the Automotive Coalition for Traffic Safety. This has been running for a very long time. So there are sensors that you could put into the cabin that use infrared I went to New York City public school. Don't laugh at me. There's a sensor that uses infrared spectrum internet to measure alcohol in your exhaled breath from ambient air. So you're not blowing into a tube. It's just going to tell the alcohol in your exhaled breath. It's made by a Swedish company called Sense Air. This is one of the more mature options. In October 2025, it looks like they declared this ready to go for auto manufacturers, yet vehicle integration would take about 1.5 to 2 years. System was announced as ready for automakers after a decade of research. You have a touch-based system. Let's say you have a sensor in the start button or the steering wheel, the gear shift that shines an infrared light through your skin to read your blood alcohol from capillaries underneath. This was developed by True Touch Technologies. The performance was pretty bad, and ACTS took over that in 2019. It's still not ready. And then you have camera systems. So the stuff that you have like in a Tesla. So in a Tesla, there's a little camera that faces you, and it tries to tell, are you looking at the road or are you looking at your phone? And will deactivate full self-driving based on whether or not you're looking at your phone. Ironically, the thing that I find hysterical about this entire system is that it's when a driver is looking at their phone that I would most want full self-driving to be on, because a driver that is staring at their phone with a robot is much better than a driver that's staring at their phone without the assistance of said robot, but that's a topic for a separate video. Seeing Machines has infrared cameras that are already in millions of General Motors, Ford, and Mercedes cars. They announced that their tech can detect alcohol impairment starting at around 0.05 blood alcohol concentration with higher accuracy above 0.1. It can't give a precise number, but most of the time that you have an issue here, it's happening very, very far above the legal limit. It's important to note that this is not like a literal kill switch where somebody from the government or your local sheriff has a button on their desk for Louis Rossman's car, and he presses the button if he doesn't like a YouTube video I've made, and my car stops working. We're talking about systems that are supposed to be locally controlled, where data does not leave them, and in that local system, it is going to detect what the state of the driver is, and then make a decision accordingly. And whether or not it is a kill switch that is controlled via somebody else, or whether the government is going to come up with the details and the rules for it, and then that is going to be implemented into my car. The reason I think you hear the word remote kill switch is not because people want to spew misinformation, but because somebody else is coming up with the rules by which my car is going to stop working. Somebody else from outside is putting that technology in my car that I don't necessarily approve of. And while I'm not saying that I want people to drive drunk, nor am I advocating for driving drunk, that doesn't necessarily mean that I want this technology installed that is going to then monitor me, and based on that monitoring, decide whether or not my vehicle is going to turn on. The reason that this is different from other safety technology fundamentally is because it is not going to beep at me. It is not going to do something. If this technology fucks up in some way and makes an error, I am stuck with a brick, and that does not benefit me. If I'm a person that does not ever get into my car under the influence of alcohol, what you're actually doing in this instance is you're installing something that provides no benefit to me whatsoever, but it provides a severe liability. And the people who are choosing to install that are from out there. And I think that's what we're talking about here versus the way that I've heard this discussed before when they say, remote kill switch, that's not true. It's not remote. It actually operates locally in your vehicle. You know what they mean when they say that, asshole. Like, let's not do this whole, like, actually bullshit. And I want to be clear about what the process is and what the technology is. And I'm going to talk to you about what some of that technology is. But I really am aggravated when I see, like, fact check false. That's not what Congress did. You're trying to say the sky is not blue, it's agua. Just really wanted to hammer home the fact that Congress voted 164 to 268 against not using this technology, meaning that Congress is in favor of something being in your car that tries to detect whether or not you're drunk to turn off the vehicle. And again, I am not a fan of drunk driving at all. Like, fuck drunk drivers. They're the scum of the earth. I don't like, truly, like, fuck them all. Fuck every single last person that thinks it's okay to endanger the lives of myself or other people. I've picked up people that are friends on New Year's Eve in Texas. I've driven on I-35 down to 6th Street to pick them up and bring them back to their home. And oh my God, it feels like you're driving in a video game where everybody has just dropped their controller on the floor. Fuck drunk drivers in the ass. That is a separate issue from the issue of the fact that, again, we live in a world where all your cars connect to the internet. We live in a world where the automakers and our government at this point in time are just not exactly the most trustworthy. And I don't like the idea of something being in my car that is computer operated, that is going to make the determination for me as to whether or not I can drive my vehicle. What happens when that system fails? What happens when it doesn't work anymore? Is my car going to be allowed to work in limp mode, or does it just not work at all? What happens if the sensor picks up the scent of alcohol, and it's because the person that I'm driving home drunk has breathed into that sensor at the wrong angle, and now I'm stuck wherever I am? And most importantly, what happens when there is some sort of hack? I've gone over this in prior videos, the sheer number of times that BMW systems have been hacked. What happens when something like that happens and some other jackass decides to log in and remotely disable my car? When you're talking about standard driver safety systems, when those systems fail, they annoy me. They make annoying noises. It may make my steering wheel vibrate, and all of those things I am okay with because the cost of being annoyed in the moment is worth it for that 1 out of 1,000 times where it may actually decrease the chance of an accident. Here, we're talking about my vehicle becoming my adversary. I don't think people should drive drunk. I also think it's kind of weird with the amount of political turmoil right now in the United States of America, with how much aggravation there is, and with the sheer amount of fuckery that most companies do when they get something to connect to the internet to allow this. Even if you were to put this together in a system where it is said to be offline only, and I understand that somebody's going to say the slippery slope fallacy thing here, I just don't care. I don't. And again, you can quote that and, like, you don't have to, I'll make the argument for you. I'm ignoring that for this, because there are just too many fucking instances. The fact that I can even have a consumer rights wiki with thousands of articles on how all these different devices that connect to the internet, all these different smart devices become your adversary very shortly after being released. I just don't feel good about that. And I don't see how that benefits me. And I don't feel like having technology in my car that very drastically increases the chances of my car becoming my adversary because of the fucked up actions of other people in the population. I'm curious what you think. Do you think that this should be put in a car? Would you feel comfortable with technology in the car that uses this type of stuff to detect whether or not you're impaired and turns off the car immediately? Or do you think that this has a lot of potential for not just misuse, but also for it to just go wrong at the worst possible time and cause you to have a car that is stalled when it otherwise would not be stalled when you most need a vehicle? If this is something that you care about, I highly suggest that you reach out to your House representative and tell them that you're for something like the No Kill Switches in Cars Act that Representative Scott Perry from Pennsylvania introduced a few months ago. That you're for what Thomas Massie tried to do. Haven't looked much into Thomas Massie, I'll be honest. Again, he's not my representative. I don't live in Kentucky. But it's one of these things where every time I see his name coming up, like Epstein files, it tends to be, like it brings a smile to my face. And I'm almost kind of afraid to look at his voting history and everything else, because I don't want to ruin it. I don't want to have it ruined for me, but I don't know. It's one of these things where, like, Trump starts shitting on a politician. I look into what he did and it's like, oh, okay, I'll take some more of this. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. That's it for today. And as always, I hope you learned something. I'll see you in the next video. Bye now.